And we're going to start with roll call and then Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call. Susan.
Here.
Here. It's at the end. Okay, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you please stand? Say the Pledge of Allegiance with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Well, we want to make sure we welcome everybody here and welcome the school board to the, we've been here before, but I still welcome you. We have introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions. Wow.
Well, we have two
Dr.
brief
Sarvis.
introductions today,
Afternoon.
afternoon. One is our translator, Alma Flores. Alma, would you please come forward and identify yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry, that would help. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Alma Flores y si necesitan los servicios de un intérprete, estoy disponible.
Very good.
Gracias. And the second is two students that I'm very pleased to introduce to you. To introduce the students, I'm going to ask Paul Turnbull, who is the current principal of Santa Barbara High School, to come forward. Paul Turnbull next year will be our assistant superintendent for secondary education services. And with him, I'd like Deyanira Real and Han Duong to come forward. Let me tell you about these students. 60 hours of community service completed over a 4-year period is a graduate requirement for students in our district. And that sets the stage for service all over the community in many different settings. I'm pleased to introduce two of our community service superstars from Santa Barbara High School. Deyanira Real recently received the William Stewart Service Award and the Santa Barbara High School Service Star Award. She completed 773 hours of community service. Deyanira has been a youth counselor for Girls Inc., active with LULAC-related events such as volunteering with the Red Cross and mentoring at Cesar Chavez School, and she has helped at the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinic. Deyanira plans to attend Santa Barbara City College in the fall. Congratulations. And Han Duong is a 2007 Distinguished Don, member of the National Honor Society, and recipient of several scholarship awards. Han received the school's Community Service Award for the most hours earned. Han has completed 843 hours. She has done everything from ushering at the school plays to volunteering at college hospitals, infant unit, developing and mentoring youth color guard teams, and tutoring students in French and chemistry. Han received a University of the Pacific Regent Scholarship and will be attending UOP in the fall. Congratulations, Han. And that concludes our presentations.
Boy, that's wonderful. It's amazing. I was just trying to figure out what that was per week, but it's an amazing amount. Whatever it is,
It's a lot of time.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of Saturdays, isn't it,
Yeah.
kids?
Okay, any other presentations or recognitions? I
That's
think
it,
not.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comment? I think we had some public comment slips. Yeah. We don't have slips, but anyway, come on up.
I mainly came to speak about the issue of what's termed here youth violence, and I'm really upset that it has been placed as the last item on the agenda. It seems to me the most important item and not one to be discussed at the end when everybody wants to go home. So I would like to request that you guys put this as the first item on the agenda. As long as I still have some time, I'm going to go ahead and make some comments about this because I have a lot of comments. You know, if you want to know what the biggest contributor is to the problem of youth violence in the community, you don't need to look any further than the school district, the Santa Barbara School District, and their policies regarding their truancy program and the SARB, the Student Attendance Review Board. They like nothing more than to funnel students, especially students with learning disabilities and ADD and mental health problems, and especially low-income Hispanic students, but any family they think they can get away with this with, to just funnel them into the truancy program and otherwise expel them and put them into El Puente, get them out of their, so that they don't have to be accountable for them on the NCLB achievement lists. It works quite well for them. And if many of these students are supposed to be given by law, their disabilities are supposed to be identified, they're supposed to be given services. And this school board, I have most of my experiences is with the school board before Kate Parker came, and I don't know how she is on these issues, but the other members of the school board, aside from Mr. Noel, who's been very helpful, have been horrible about this. They've been rude when Joan Esposito and I have been trying to make public comments about it. Nancy Harder actually accidentally sent me an email where after Joan Esposito and Joan Esposito is too sick to come to this meeting because her office is overflowing with families trying to get services, families of children with disabilities whose kids are being expelled. And she can't keep up with it. Anyway, Nancy Harder, we had emailed her to see if she would meet with us to talk about the kids with disabilities who are being expelled, and she sent an email to former school board member Lynn Rodriguez, accidentally sent me back a copy saying, I don't want to meet with them. Can you help me think of some ideas of how to get out of it? This is what we've been dealing with this school board, and I'm asking the city council for help.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Is that done? Were there any others? Do you know? Any other public comment? Yes.
We will be having a presentation on just how the truancy program works and that sort of thing on item 13.
We're not agendized for the truancy program per se. The truancy program, truancy and student attendance is part of the budget. The relationship between student violence and truancy is a little more tenuous, but we could have some discussion at that point.
We had, the truancy program was a joint venture of the city council and the school district and the DA's office and a whole bunch of groups years ago, and I'm trying to think how long ago. Maybe 7, 8 years ago, something like that.
We have Mr. Gonzalez with us who
Yeah.
knows the
So-
background very well.
So we might want to put it on a future agenda, but for right now. So people who are newer to our council or to school, although I'm sure the school board knows about it, but people newer to the council might not.
I've been assured by city staff that we would have the opportunity to talk about this today, and if you remember in the last meeting, both Brian Barnwell and myself asked it to be on this
Oh,
agenda.
I don't remember that.
So you know, I do think that it is an appropriate subject to talk about under item 12 or 13. It doesn't really matter to me, except that I've been asking to discuss this for a long time, and I think we should be. There's a lot of things that I don't understand about the SARB and the truancy program. I'd really like to know the staff's opinion of how it's doing, what is its metrics for success, what is the system,
Okay.
and I don't know that.
Okay. Well, the purpose for this joint meeting is for the city council and the school district to work together, and we have been for quite a number of years now, and to meet together and to talk about items of mutual interest. And the main item of mutual interest is our children. That's not a secret. So we're glad that the school district does what they do, because I truly think, and it's just my opinion, but I think a lot of people's opinion, we don't have failing schools here. We don't have any really bad teachers and all that. When I go around, I get to go to classrooms and see kids, and they ask me about being mayor and so on. And It's really an amazingly wonderful district, so that's just my opinion, and I haven't been called Pollyanna for nothing. Did you want to say anything, Nancy, as chair of the board? Or president? That's on the top. Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
You can either
No,
talk
I
into
just-
it or clip it on, either way.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I just want to make the remark that these meetings are now becoming routine, and I see that as real progress, that we're having regular conversations about our students and our children in our community, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Good. Okay. Okay, item number 6, Joint Use Committee. On the purpose of the joint meeting? Okay, do we have any speaker slips? We just didn't bring any. Oh, the speaker slips are right over there. Normally, I understand, it's okay, go ahead. Go ahead, I was just, because normally they hand them to me and then I can call on you instead of going to the next item.
You know, I can't think of a better purpose for this joint meeting than to talk about the welfare of the kids here. And the school system is not just fine, Marty Bloom. You know better than anyone else. I'm really disappointed in your statement. You know well that it's not just fine. The other thing is, I cannot believe that we have a city council person, Doss Williams, that asked that the truancy program be put on the agenda. And once again, the school board manipulated things so it doesn't show up on the agenda. This is an important issue, and I can't believe that you're trying to minimize it and not have it be an agenda item after he asked for it to be. This is an outrage.
Okay, item 6, please. Joint Use Committee Annual Report. Mhm. We're all struggling with these little things.
Not a high-tech guy. The written reports are actually items 6 through 11, and I think our practice has been, if there are any questions or comments that council or school board members would want to make on the written reports, we could do that now.
Okay, are there anybody want to take anything off to talk about it? Yes, Helene,
Number 8, just very briefly.
okay, go ahead.
This is about the collaboration that the school district and the city councils and the city of Santa Barbara's had about environmental issues and sustainability. And I didn't plan for that, but I see our city's sustainability report being passed around, which is great. I've been serving as the council liaison to the school district's group on recycling and other issues related to sustainability district-wide and then also at Harding School. And just wanted to report out to the group and to those listening what a great partnership it's been. And a lot of work this past school year has occurred in terms of really finding a systematic way of dealing with recycling at each different campus, which is one campus is very different from the other in terms of the equipment needed, both inside the schools and on the outside of the campuses, how the haulers interact with each campus, and during breaks and summer times, how you can reduce service, thus reducing money that's spent on unnecessary services. So I just wanted to compliment the partnership there, and I really appreciated being a part of that. And we hope by September, and August, September, as it shows in the report, to have every campus outfitted appropriately with any kind of blue can or dumpster or whatever it is that's needed, and I'm really excited to see that happen. And kudos go to Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Hetjonk and our city staff, Eric Lolia and Celeste, and other staff. So I just, congratulations, and I look forward to seeing the diversion rate go up and the cost of services go down. So, thank you.
Very good, okay. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. House. Which number?
I had a question about, I think it's just item 6, the Joint Use Committee Annual Report. And in the report, it identifies on, I think it's second page there, junior high after-school sports program, and it notes that participation is lower for the 4 junior high program sites, and then it has a list of 7 what are called challenges. And then it says that both partners, the school district and the city staff, will be putting together a proposal and bringing it back to us. I was wondering about the time frame for that and when we would be hearing back on that.
Turned it off.
Hannah.
Good afternoon, I'm Sarah Hanna with Recreation Programs Manager. We've met twice currently with the school district on bringing the program back around. First, we met with the administrative staff, and then this last week we met with the coaching staff at each of the individual high schools. We are putting together a collaborative to work with the district on perhaps bringing in partners and other ideas to maximize our dollars and really develop this program into beyond an after-school sports program, but also into enrichment activities and other areas of interest that we would like to bring to the individual school sites. So it does take a couple months in the process to bring all these collaborators on board, but as we do normally, we'll be bringing back our agreements in July or August prior to the start of the school year for board approval and for city council approval prior to the start of the year.
Start of the school year
Yes.
this year. Okay, that's great. And it looks like there have been a number of things that have really worked out well, sharing of equipment and all sorts of things, scheduling and maintenance. And,
You know, I wish
upkeep.
Jan Zettel was here, but whenever we have joint use committee meetings, there is such a great cooperative spirit. We have made some excellent purchases this year in the field scheduling program that really benefit both the city and the school district. And every time we meet and whenever I call any of the district staff, everyone is so receptive and helpful to getting the work done, looking at the community benefit, and really moving forward. That it's really, I feel very lucky. Not all cities enjoy this pleasure of having such a nice relationship with the district.
Oh, it's just great. Thank you very much, Ms. Hanna.
Thanks very much.
Okay, any other reports? People want to take off? Oh,
Quick
it's harder.
question. That's okay. Quick question on 7 and 11. 7 talks about the easements, and my question, I suppose it would be for Mr. Hetjonk, does that include the well on the corner of Anapamu and the entrance to Santa Barbara High School?
No.
I mean, I'm just curious if you can give us a quick update on that.
No,
Yeah.
the easement for the well at Santa Barbara High School was actually an easement that the city purchased. So that's a permanent easement. This has to do with streets that were vacated that the district is using, that the fee schedule wasn't vacated properly maybe 40, 50 years ago, or a wrong street was referenced, and it's just going back and cleaning up those types of things. One would be the road coming into Santa Barbara High School off Carrillo, that on paper goes underneath the pool and underneath the gymnasium. Also, some I think Franklin is one of the other sites, and Mr. Olson and city staff have been identifying those with the help of computer technology and mapping. It's easy to pull those out and find them, and we're going back and rectifying those things.
Great. And then my other question had to do with 11, not really a question, a comment. It lists school district projects, and I'm wondering if you could clarify within what time frame the bond construction projects are occurring, because this is just a fraction of the construction projects, and I don't want anybody to think that this was it.
No, these are current projects. There's been a lot of completed projects at Santa Barbara High School right now. We're finishing up the modernization. We had the library grand opening the other day. The project that's just now starting is the ADA upgrade and the replacement of the theater seats at the theater at Santa Barbara High School, and replacement of the theater seats is due to 100% of fundraising activities by the Santa Barbara Theater Foundation. They've been very active and successful in raising $100,000 to replace those seats. We still have numerous projects left with our elementary bond as far as some modernization, some work coming up, reconfiguring portables at Washington Elementary School. Off the top of my head, let me see. And a new ramp at the front of Peabody for handicapped access, similar to the one at Santa Barbara Junior High School. Same type of thing, trying to put it off to the side where it doesn't really interfere with the historical significance of that front entrance.
excuse me,
And I
Dave.
I did not include construction projects that were not within the city limit boundaries. So you'll see that Dos Pueblos High School, San Marcos High School, and Goleta Valley Junior High School, where we have a lot of things going on, I didn't put on this report.
Thank you.
Dave, could you enumerate more of the projects at Santa Barbara High School? I know that's always of interest to the city council, and as soon as we finish the last of the 5 elevators, we'll have a ribbon cutting and all get in the elevator together.
Right, and it's kind of sometimes the title of the project doesn't completely describe the total scope. Along with those 5 elevator projects, of course, the state reviews our plans, and there's also some upgrades associated with those in some spaces next to the elevators. Maybe there's a restroom next to the elevator that needed some upgrades for handicapped accessibility, and those types of things are also included. Paths of travel all around the school, so the school will be fully accessible from all points. Whatever parking lot you park in, you'll be able to access the whole school without going back to your car and having to move to another parking lot. Santa Barbara High School started the renovation process for Measure V that the voters passed. Thank you, voters, if you're watching on TV. Starting with the pool renovation and enlargement in 2001, 2002. Around that time frame, when the city purchased their well as part of that project, we abandoned an old water line, put in a new potable water line. The city donated the materials. The district furnished the labor and administered the contract and completed that also. So there's basically at Santa Barbara High School all new infrastructure for potable water and electricity. It's all underneath that road that was redone a few years back. So there's, at least $1 million sitting in the ground that the public will never see, but it allows that school to function. There's also 2 contracts for modernization of classrooms areas. In the main building in the 30s wing, there was a contract to modernize the music rooms, both the instrumental and the vocal rooms. There was some ADA improvements, like I say, all over the school. Gymnasium bleachers, the elevators, 2 are at the gymnasium building. There's 1 at the back of the main building. 2 at what we call the English Social Studies building, and then 1 on the back side of the 30s parking lot going down to the athletic field. So we're building 5 now. We have 1 already complete, so there'll be 6 elevators total at Santa Barbara High School for accessibility. So, and then following up will be the rebuild of the Creel Street Road, which is important because it is our handicapped access for a majority of the home side seating at Peabody Stadium and the pool and for emergency vehicles. And I
Wow.
hope I didn't leave anything out. But is
That's
Mr. Turnbull,
amazing.
Paul? Yeah, we have two separate, we have a modernization phase 1 and phase 2 to modernize classrooms, the 30s wing and the main building. And if you have an opportunity to walk through those, we tried to keep a lot of the historical content of those. You'll see a brand new whiteboard, but still have the nice trim that you'd see in that period of school around the outside. And if you have an opportunity to check out the restrooms, nice new tile patterns, hallways, some of the flooring is new, and especially in the Fieldhouse building, the women's locker room was completely redone, ADA access in a project after the pool.
Very
Any
good.
other questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the reports? Okay. Then we can go on to item number 12, I believe. School district budget.
Good. I'd like to introduce this item, and then I'll be bringing Ed Diaz, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, up. The Santa Barbara School District has cut more than $5 million from its $125 million. Oh, that's not quite working. How's that? We have cut over $5 million from our $125 million operating budget. Making budget cuts is not new to our district. We've been in declining enrollment for a number of years, and we've been making cuts for a number of years. I would like to talk to you about what the budget cuts mean to the district. In addition to the class size increases that resulted in a reduction of over 40 temporary teaching positions. That's half of that money, over half of that money. A list of $2.5 million in budget cuts that was adopted by the board in April is presented in front of you and is on the it's on the overhead. In fact, Mr. Diaz will be walking us through that list. These budget cuts include moving class sizes up by 1 to 3 students, but they also impose caps on most class sizes. So, for example, at the high school, we will have no more than 35 students in a usual class. Now, there are always some larger classes, whether they're in PE or they're band, that are just larger than that 35 students, but most classes will be limited to 35 students. Some cuts are in program costs or shifts to funding sources outside the general fund. This last year, the state came through with additional money. The state came through with additional money for additional programs, and some of those are shifts to those programs, and we have to qualify for those programs. In order to keep the budget cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, we've further reduced the number of administrators, leaving us well below the state average for a district our size. Most cuts were to programs that avoided cutting talented teaching staff, although after paring the budget for years, it's very difficult to find cuts that avoid cutting staff. We have well over 80% of our budget devoted to salaries and benefits. We are a people-rich institution. Most of our money goes to people. We are pleased that we've already been able to rescind layoff notices for all but 11 of our probationary and temporary teachers. And I know that that's been an issue in the news. We had to start this process in March, and we're now down to just 11 layoffs among probationary and temporary teachers. The cuts allow us to pay our 1,600 employees at higher levels, and we feel that's important. For example, we just settled a 3-year contract with our teacher and certificated staff union, and I understand that you have more unions than we have. I don't envy you. But that union includes our nurses, counselors, people who have certificates from the state of California. And that settlement allows us to start our beginning teachers at a salary of $44,000 a year, and it moves our 23-year veterans to a salary of almost $80,000 a year, not this July, but the following July. It was a 3-year contract, and that's where we'll be just a little over a year from now. Built into the contract for teachers are additional automatic step and column salary increases. For example, each of the first 10 years, teachers on top of these other increases get about a 4% salary increase, and it's just automatic. It follows regularly year after year. It also includes automatic salary increases for longevity, stipends for advanced degrees, $6,600 per year in health benefits, more than 11% in statutory benefits such as retirement, Medicare, and workers' compensation. And I know you're familiar with salary schedules like that. Conversely, and I want to make this point very strongly, I think it's important to know what the budget cuts do not mean. For example, in the GATE programs, there was some support that was reduced for the GATE programs. However, that will have no effect on the number of students in GATE classes or our number of GATE classes. Those classes pay for themselves. In fact, anytime we have a group of 35 students taking a class, it pays for itself, and it's out of general state funding. The budget cuts were spread across a number of areas with only a few of the programs cut entirely. At the junior high level, junior highs will continue to have electives. I have heard that a number of times, that we won't have any electives. We will continue to have electives, quite a few electives, but fewer of the extra electives with low enrollments that they were able to maintain over the last couple of years. Elementary music classes will continue with instruction provided by 2 instrumental teachers. 2 instrumental music teachers in grades 4, 5, and 6 instead of the 3 that we've had for the past couple of years. So this moves us back to a point where we were just about 3 years ago in instrumental music at the elementary level. The study of various foreign languages, there's also been some publicity about that, will simply continue based on student demand. And if there's less demand for one foreign language and more demand for another, then we are following student demand, and it's not a function of budget cuts that we would make changes. The budget cuts are necessary for us to live within our means. We will continue to explore a number of avenues to control costs and maximize revenues, and future discussions will include such issues as maximizing student attendance. I mean, these are areas where there are big potential pots of money. Student attendance is a big one. At $45 a day, our truancy numbers are important to us. Of course, they're important to the health of the budget, and they are also important to the health of student learning. We also feel that enforcing truancy sets the expectation that students will stay in school and continue until they graduate and not drop out. We will also conduct ongoing studies of the possible budget reductions in both the elementary and secondary budgets through a district committee. We will explore a substantial revenue stream, potentially substantial revenue stream from district properties. We'll be looking at crossing the threshold to basic aid funding in our elementary district. I won't go into an explanation of that, but if you're interested, ask me. And we'll be evaluating the cost of operating small schools, because we have a number of elementary schools that are smaller in size now, and potential lease of district facilities. Ed Diaz is our Assistant Superintendent for Business Services. Ed, talk to us about the list, the $2.5 million list of cuts.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. Without going over every single one of these 26 items, I think the important thing first to note is that we did it in over 3 years. We had to do some things in 06, 07, so we had to identify some items that we could do right now. As we know, budgets are hard to change mid-year, but we sought out some items, shifting funding around out of the general fund. Keep in mind, I'm referring to items that were being funded out of our unrestricted general fund, which was the problem. It was in deficit. So we, in 06, 07, we were able to move. This year, we were able to move some things into different funding sources. For next year, we made many changes to our structure, moving things, discontinuing, moving things, some of which the superintendent has just elaborated on. But it's important, I think, for the public and everybody to know, last year our general fund budget, or the complete budget for the school district, was $125 million. This year, 07, 08, it's going to be $123 million, $2 million less. We project about 192 less students coming into our system this year, and those are funded at approximately $6,300 apiece. So there's 1.1 million right there, just boom, right off the top of the general fund. So it is a constant challenge to meet all the needs, especially in a special place such as Santa Barbara, where we have high expectations. The community has high expectations here. And in the simplest explanation I could give you for the school district's budget concerns are that we simply are not funded at the level of services we're providing. It's just that simple. And it's a gut-wrenching experience for the entire community, for the superintendent and our board to go through and to decide where the money goes. And so that is an ongoing process that we continually continually takes place in our system. But beyond that, if you go down the list, and I'm not going to read all 26 items on the list, you have those in front of you. But as Dr. Sarvis mentioned, those are a variety of program reductions, funding shifts, And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of reductions, and again, the layoffs that he mentioned. On the positive side, however, I think that the quality and the timeliness of our financial reporting is going to improve here in the next year or so that we'll be able to provide the board and the public more accurate and timely financial information. Any time that you can identify a problem early on, early intervention as the educators refer to it, and I think we have done that in our district quite well. We have identified the areas where the problems exist, and we are putting together early intervention strategies to address them so that I'm not standing up here in front of you in the year 2008 and 9 telling you what happened when we didn't know what happened. Now, we know what's going to happen. The superintendent has a firm handle on the reins of the district and is giving me clear direction on what actions to take fiscally, and we were moving, with the board support, we're moving forward. There'll be a complete budget, another budget update for the community on the meeting of June 12th. I will more further elaborate on the 07-08 budget development process at that time. On June 26th, we'll be taking our final budget, our 07-08 budget, to the board for adoption on on June 26th. If you'd like to ask any questions about any of those items, I'll do my best with them. If not, thank you very much.
Well, on June 26th, the city is having its final vote on its budget too, so it's going to be a big day for the newspapers the next day. Dr. Noel?
Mr. Williams has had his hand up before me, but I do have my
ahead.
hand up.
Mr. Williams, go ahead.
I've met several of you in different events while the budget process has been going, and this is one of those rare cases where I would cringe to have to make these decisions that you guys are making. I mean, I can't. I do not envy you this task, and I just wanted to offer that if the individual board members, if the teachers union, if anyone ever begins an effort to try to augment this from a revenue perspective through a parcel tax or any other measure, that I would work tirelessly on your behalf, because it's just, as much as I feel like you've minimized the damage, these are some great programs, and I think you all know that, and did not very reluctantly engaged in this task because it was necessary. But if there's ever a way to augment this through revenue, I would want to help, and I'm sure other colleagues on the council would want to as well.
Dr. Noel?
Yes. Is this on? Okay. Two things. One is that you say on the 12th of June we're having a budget discussion. At the time these cuts were made, there were two focal point meetings, and the public attendance was very, very small, which for many of us was very lamentable, and I think for a lot of the people in the community after the fact, they felt that this was not really publicized enough, and I'm wondering if we might make an extra effort, outreach, to make sure that stakeholders in the budgets have a chance to come and hear all of the discussions, and to read in advance the proposals, what's going to be cut, get the cut lists out, so that we can have a fuller public participation in that process. That's one. Well, I already forget what the other one was, but when I get it, may I come back if it's not too late?
Absolutely. Okay, anybody else? Yes, Ms. Schneider has a question for you.
Thank you. Two questions. One is the reduction of the student population, and you hear a lot of things, and I just wanted to know your perspective. And the two things you hear sometimes are contradictory. One is everyone's moving out of town, you're losing your middle class, the whole issue about housing, and so they take their kids with them, which means it reduces the student population. The other thing I hear is that some of those same people are still commuting, parents are still commuting back here to work, and a lot of them bring their kids with them to be in school where they work. So can't have it both ways. It is, and I'd just be curious to know first, what do you see as what are the symptoms about the reduction in student population, and is it a combination of those? Are there other things? Start there. I don't know where to start asking
think
that
that's a
question.
question
Mr.
for our
Sarvis.
Perhaps
superintendent.
I can give you a sense of that. All of the South Coast districts are still losing students. Our highest student population is now, because of the population bulge, at the 11th grade level. So we had more 12th graders graduate. We're having more 12th graders in our 1,600 graduates this year than we had last year. So that number is still going up, but it drops considerably as we go to 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, and 7th grade is very low by comparison. The lowest grade level right now is 5th grade, so it's 4th grade and 5th grade. However, as you go down through the grades, continuing on down, grades 2, 1, and kindergarten are larger than current 4th and 5th grades. So there seems to be another bulge of the population coming through.
And is that more of a larger demographic population growth and shift that happen, like, you know, baby booms and then baby busts? And I mean, it's not just Santa Barbara County. I mean, we're talking beyond.
There were
our
more
control
births.
here.
There were more
Okay.
births than the county 7 years ago. Yes.
Just in general. Okay.
Now, since we're still losing students, we've been watching to see which students we've been losing. And for a number of years, it was the middle class. This last fall, for the first time, we saw a shift, and we saw a loss of our, in addition to the middle class, of our lowest socioeconomic students. And that has an effect on jobs in this community, because these are the children of our service sector in this community. And as you know, there are jobs available all over town at the lower wage level. We expect to see a continued decline. We don't expect it to be large, however. It looks like it's going to be only 1%, 2%, maybe 3% at the most. Our elementary district is one of the 5 elementary feeder schools into our secondary district, and our elementary district is the only district that has not either crossed the threshold of basic aid or will soon cross that threshold. All of those other elementary districts do not take transfer students. Our elementary district still takes some 350 transfer students. So as people come up in the 25,000 person commute from the south or come in from North County, those students come into our elementary, many of those students come into our elementary district from out of the area. Not very many of them come in from other elementary districts. Well, some do, but relatively speaking. We also take transfers into the secondary district, into the 7th through 12th grade district. And I suppose then the question is, are those numbers propping up our student numbers? Is it the commute into town that's keeping our numbers up? And of course it'd be, well, we watch these numbers every fall. We take an official count the first Wednesday in October, and that's the count that's used by schools across the state of California as the official enrollment count. So we will continue to watch that.
Thank you. And then the other question, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. I want to echo Dawson in terms of how hard this must be, and I would hate to be in your situation and dealing with cuts, and yet it's the reality you have to deal with, and it's mandated. Some of the programs or number of classrooms available or subjects available, I'm curious if there's any mechanism to monitor the change in student activity or what's happening to, like, some of the classrooms where you said there were low student attendance, but there were still students there. So what happens, where did they go next? Are they filtered in through another classroom that does still exist? Do they do something completely different? Do they just go home? And I'm just curious if that monitoring is happening. And I ask that because as we hopefully get in a better fiscal situation, you're able to bring back some of the things that were cut, to be able to prioritize which ones come first. And I'm just curious if that's part of what you're doing. And it'd be interesting information to see too as we get into the next topic about activities and what what our students are interested in doing. If the door's closed in one area, there's another door open somewhere else, and just to, not quite sure if I'm phrasing it correctly, but I think you get where I'm going with it.
Well, we do go ahead. We do monitor that closely, yes.
I think you're probably referring to elective class choices.
Yeah.
And what's happened is when there's a low demand in a particular area, the student, it's not that they're not taking an elective, they're gravitating toward a different elective. And I think probably, I won't speak for other board members, but I think that we're all trying to keep an eye on what's happening, particularly at the junior high, and try and find ways to restore more options at the junior high level.
Go ahead.
The comment that I forgot for
Okay.
now. I hear things like a particular teacher at a particular junior high won't be back, and this particular one would have made the difference for us whether our kid even went there or not. And we all get calls from people who really care a lot about particular teachers and particular classes. Is there a way to get out to the public kind of a last shot list of what is being offered and what is being cut and being offered at each school, so the public understands that as far before school begins in the fall as possible? If music is being cut at a campus, or if a particular music program is being cut, people ought to have that chance. Now that raises another question, which I have a lot of very mixed feelings about. They can go somewhere else. That has been happening a lot, and it's a matter of concern, I think, to all of us. Like La Colina is, 980 students now, or something like that. Santa Barbara Junior High has dropped under 800. Part of this is due to the attrition in enrollment, to decrease in enrollments, not attrition, that Dr. Sarvis talked about. But part of it is due to flight to other campuses. And I think that that's something I'm not sure the city council is aware of, and it takes them out of the city, in fact. But it's certainly something that systemically is very important, trying to achieve balance. Part of the problem is that both Santa Barbara Junior High and La Colina, and La Cumbre are program improvement schools, sanctions under NCLB. We don't know how many people leave for that reason. Maybe we have data on that. I've never been aware of it. But it gives people the right to leave. As often as not, the people you'd like to stay are the ones who leave, rather than it being an avenue for the lowest achievers to try something new. Those folks don't tend to move very much. So these are kind of intertwined. But I particularly want to ask that we can get that information out about the elective courses, particularly for parents sometime in this summer.
Okay. Yes, Mr. House. Bales?
Sort of on the heels of that, and I see the last item here on the list is an example of what I'm going to talk about, and that is there was a need to reduce the district support for elementary music program. But then it says the program will retain 2 of the 3 teachers thanks to the ongoing contributions of the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. And as Dr. Noel says, there may very well be upsides and downsides of letting everybody know of all these cuts. One of the upsides might be, if it were framed properly, the opportunity to contribute, the opportunity to pick up a piece of the burden, either private foundations or coalitions or groups or individuals who might feel philanthropic and see value in one or another of the programs. And I think that there's a lot of sort of doom and gloom out there on this, and maybe the concept of it being a community challenge and a chance to participate, maybe that's one spin that could bear some fruit. So I just put that out there as a possibility, and certainly it seems like at least one organization here has stepped right up.
I think we said the other day at city council meeting that for a city that can raise the $250 million for a wonderful new hospital, and I'm glad we have, and almost $50 million now to restore a theater, and I'm glad for that too. We should be able to raise some money for the city schools. And I really believe that, and maybe we just have to have a different mindset.
Well, and actually, I think maybe for those who are watching, it was to me in our budget discussion the other day, in particular about the youth programs, where we had, and Nancy Rapp's here somewhere, and I want to just really thank her because the Parks and Recreation Department took the opportunity to reach out to the neighborhood centers and got all those boards together and had them make a list of priorities of things that they felt would really make a difference for the young people. And there were a list of 9 things on there, 7 of which it appears are going to be recommended for inclusion in our budget based on our Finance Committee's recommendation. And the 9th we're not going to be able to get, but the 8th, which was like $95,000, the Park Foundation stepped up to fund, or some portion of it anyway. And you know, that's, to me, that making that list and presenting it as an opportunity allowed us in the City Council to look at it from a priority perspective. And there were relatively small amounts of money after all each one, but they make a big difference. But then that last piece, that was really cool to have a foundation step in and want to contribute and participate. So anyway, there's good examples out there.
Good, we probably need to get on to item 13 because that's, oh, I'm sorry, Kate, go ahead. No, that's fine. Because it goes in.
This too, and I absolutely agree with Mr. House. I think that that is a direction that we could make a lot of progress in terms of fundraising for the schools. But I also really do see some misconceptions about the cuts and what electives are available. Sometimes I'll get emails from people saying, oh, you know, you're cutting electives, we're going to be moving our kids to private schools. So I looked just typically at Santa Barbara High School as an example, and the principal is here and he could address this if need be. But looking at the fine and performing arts at Santa Barbara High, there are roughly 30 classes offered in the electives. And when you look at an independent day school locally, it's more typical to see about 10 classes offered in the fine and performing arts. So our public schools really offer a huge amount to our students, and I think that a lot of members of the community, when you see the focus on cutting specific little things, they're big things, especially the junior high level, but it's still a lot more for your money that's still available to our students.
Okay. Should we go on with item 13, Mr. Williams? Just because, I know, did you want to do it separately? 1 at 12 and 1 at 13? You said 12 and 13 together. Okay, go ahead.
I'll just say something really brief. Yeah,
Mr.
which is just to be in agreement of that. I'm one of these folks who my role often on the council or in front of the school board is to talk about what we could be doing better. That I'm just one of those kind of people. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there are some great things in our public schools, and this is just one of those things that we are a lot stronger hanging together than we are hanging separately, because if people start jumping ship right now, that's when we'll really be starting to hurt in funding. So keep your kids in public schools, you know, and we can get out of this together.
Okay, Ms. Reynard.
The city seems to be trying to do a good job in offering positive programs to youth and putting their money into that. But, you know, until the schools stop using their authoritarian methods to criminalize students and to punish them, you know, it's okay if you're a good student and you know how to study, but if you're a student with some sort of disability that makes it hard for you to achieve in school, you're not so lucky. So the school has been acting as though this is the 1940s, and psychology hasn't advanced since then. Punishing kids is the best way to get them to do what they want them to do or don't want them to do. And the federal government is loaded with research on how positive school-wide behavior programs and other similar programs produce results where authoritarian punitive methods do not. But this school district won't listen to that, won't look at those things, and they're still continuing on with their ways. So no matter how many programs the city tries to have to help these kids, as long as they're being treated like little criminals when actually they have problems that need to be addressed, then you're going to have the same problems, and the city will be spending its money for very little purpose. I'd also like to say, as far as the school's budget goes, you know, if the school would stop spending thousands of dollars on attorneys to fight parents, and they're not accountable in any way for the money that they spend on private attorney firms to fight parents' requests for services for their kids with disabilities. They use it to fight parents that are trying to keep they use their attorneys to fight parents that are trying to keep their kids from being expelled. And this expense is in no way accountable on their budget. There's no accountability for it. It's not transparent in any way. So that's a good way. You could cut your budget, Mr. Sarvis.
Okay.
Somebody needs to move this chair so that there's a way to the podium from the seats.
Yeah, I don't think we can move the chair but we move the podium, which we will do. Thank you. Okay, item 13, presentation on initiatives in response to youth violence. We have presenters. Shall we just go down the line? Dr. Sarvis, are you first?
Sure, we have
Okay.
a strong working relationship with the Santa Barbara Police Department, and to honor that relationship, we're going to allow Cam Sanchez, Chief, to go first.
Okay. It's always a good idea to let the police chief go when he wants to. That's good. Chief Sanchez.
Dr. Sarvis. I apologize in advance for leaving your meeting early. I have to be in Paso Robles at 5 o'clock, but I guess
Whoa.
that's why they give me a car with lights and sirens.
Yeah, and don't
guess.
speed.
Yeah, is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a few things you may not be aware of. Since March 14th, when we had the terrible tragedy on State Street, a lot of things have continued, actually. About 2 months prior to that terrible day when Luis was murdered, we had already begun some dialogue with the community. We had actually had 6 community meetings prior to that. In fact, we had one the night before at Franklin Center. We play a kind of a unique role. We're your law enforcement agency. And as I've mentioned before, I'm never going to apologize for protecting you. But we also play a great role proactively. And some of the things that we're doing, as a matter of fact, our biggest success for the last few years has been our Police Activities League. We currently have about 1,800 children involved in that. 83% of them are Latinos, and 50% of those, 83%, come from homes where only Spanish is spoken. But if you were to go from Monday to Friday from 3 to 7 to the police department, you could see at least 40 or 50 children there on a daily basis working on computers, getting mentored, getting tutored, and doing some sports. But it's not all about sports. Our goal as a police department is to keep our kids in school, period. And in the process, assisting them in becoming better citizens. So we've been working very, very strongly with that for a long, long time. A few things that you might want to know that we're looking about doing for the fall is bringing back a program that was here before I got here and was discontinued, which was is called our SHOW program, our Serious Habitual Offender program. I realize that that is a controversial issue. It was back then, and it probably will be again. But I believe that we need to identify, not identify students in a profiling sense, but identify students that need help and to help their families. So we're working with the probation, with the schools very soon, with the district attorney's office, and with other nonprofits like Casa de la Raza and Zona Seca, in meeting with families prior to even doing this again. And I mentioned to Mr. House the other day at the council meeting that we're going to be very sensitive about how we do that. So we're not going to rush to that at all. If it doesn't happen in the fall, then it doesn't happen. We want to make sure that we deliver that appropriately. I'll try to be as brief as possible. There are a lot of programs that we're involved in, but the biggest program that we're involved with is the continued outstanding relationship with the schools in terms of our school resource officers and the things that we do with PAL, of course, but also assisting the schools in identifying individuals that need some intervention. And we want to work more and more with that. In our communities, it's been very interesting. Over at Franklin School, a few months ago, a group of parents decided to develop their own parent group. and I've been to both of them. They meet, I believe the men meet every Monday night at 6 o'clock. The ladies, the moms meet at 9:30 on Thursday mornings, and I've been to both groups. And I'm here to tell you the moms are still in charge, just for the record.
True.
But the biggest issue is feeling safe in their community and allowing their children to be safe on campus and to be able to learn and to make their life better. As one who came to this country not speaking this language, I can very much appreciate what they're asking for. And our schools definitely need to be the safest. That should be sacred ground. And as we've noticed around the country, that has been violated on a variety of occasions, unfortunately in critical and terrible ways. But we're working with the community. We're going to begin our Spanish language citizens academies again, both at Harding School and at Franklin. And that starts July and August. We have over 175 parents signed up. I don't know where we're going to put them, but we'll put them somewhere. They are interested in one thing, to better their lives. Over the last few months, specifically after the homicide on State Street, we continue to talk about gangs as an issue. We do have gangs in Santa Barbara. In Santa Barbara, the gang members that do live here happen to be Latino. So when we start talking about youth violence and gangs, we need to really kind of bring it back to center and understand that we do not want to put the word gang in anything, because there are a lot of other youths who are not Latino, who are not gang members, who also need to be addressed in both a reactive mode and a proactive mode. We have a lot of young people who commit crimes on campus, off campus, who are not Latino, and we need to not ignore their needs. So we decided, my boss Jim Armstrong and I, that we would address this in the future as a youth violence issue, because it in fact is that, and gangs is a part of that. Just wanted to make that clear, because if you were to go to our PAL programs, you would see that it looks like the United Nations in these rooms with all these kids. So it's really, really amazing. The police department continues to protect you, but our goal is to keep all kids safe and not profile and allow them to succeed. So we're working very closely with Parks and Rec. Nancy was here. Oh, hi, Nan. Sorry. We're working very closely on a variety of issues, and I won't steal her thunder, but I believe that despite the fact that we're not perfect at doing this, we're making every effort to work with our young people and decrease crime and at the same time uplift them to do this. We're currently working with the downtown organization, the Hispanic Chamber, and also the regular chamber, if you will, on offering jobs to students and mentoring. I've met with over 150 business people in the last 2 months, and they are ready in the fall to start offering jobs and mentoring to all young people, not just those young people that are in gangs, but maybe having some educational needs and maybe some other issues in their life that they need help with. So it's really holistic, and we're working very closely with Nancy and her staff, and it's just a great partnership, and I think it's going to be extremely successful. Recently, we've begun to work very strongly with Matt Sanchez. As you know, Matt works with heavy-duty intervention of gang membership. One of their young people, I believe, is going to get a job. This young man came to talk to me about how to fill out an application because he happens to just turn 17, and his twin girls will be 2 next week. So he became a dad at 15. And the city parks interviewed him and are going to offer him a job. And this is a young man who's very involved in gangs. Actually, he's on his way out of it, and he, I believe, will be a model. And we're looking very forward to it. I asked him in my office what his motivation was, and he said, well, my 2 younger brothers go to the teen center every day, and I have to walk them there, and they dared me to walk in, and now I go every day. And that's where he's going to be working, so it's going to be a great thing. This is just one story of a lot of things, because let me tell you something, the majority of our kids in Santa Barbara are great kids, and they're doing great things. It's unfortunate that we do not read about that as often as we do those incidents that bring negative attention to a small number, a small percentage of the kids who give us the most issue. We will not, again, apologize for protecting you. We will continue to enforce the law. We will continue to deal with gang membership, with youth violence, with whatever it takes to help our young people. On another matter, some of the things that have been going on, we added a school resource officers to the schools, bilingual. That's working out great. But I think what you need to know is that recently we've started to have briefings. Briefings in patrol is when the officers get dressed, they go into a big room, they talk about what they're going to do that night, and they go out in the field. And that briefing room happens to be in our building at the police department. But we've done some 3 or 4 times a week at all hours of the day and night. We select a location in town, we caravan there in black and whites, and we have our briefings. And recently we started having our briefings at the Franklin Center. So you can imagine at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Franklin Center, about 12 police cars caravanning to the park. It's like a parade, and everybody comes out and watches to see what is going on. And we had at least 50 or 60 community members in the park watching, why are the cops here? And someone told them they're here, they're going to start really enhancing their community relations with us, etc. When the officers left the building, they received applause from all the community members that were in the park for being in their community. And that told us something. It told us that we need to do a better job of reaching out, period. So the blame is on us. We're making it better, and the community is very appreciative. We've also now started our bicycle patrols again on both sides of town. By the way, we didn't get extra people for that. We're just doing it because we have to, and the community loves it. Some of the young people don't, but so be it. Lastly, I just wanted to share with you that along with working with Nancy, we are working with a lot of communities around town specifically to talk about community relations and making it better. In the fall, we will have 2 committees, one on the east side and one on the west side, that I will select volunteers from to meet with me on a monthly basis as an ongoing advisory committee to me on both sides of town. We're utilizing the churches, the faith-based community. We're utilizing PAL and the schools, probation, Nancy, and I think that it will be successful. I will close by telling you that many times our young people, and let me tell you, I get so tired of young people and some adults saying that there's not enough to do in Santa Barbara. That is not so. I've been a chief in 2 other cities, and let me tell you, nothing is better than being in Santa Barbara, period. We might not be perfect, but we're just the best city. We're not perfect, but we're just the best. And part of that is because of the collaboration with all of you and the parks and everyone else in the city and the county, actually. But I will share with you that our young people who make a conscious decision to get involved in violence, it's a conscious decision. I know that there is peer pressure and all those sorts of things that we think about and talk about, but the majority of our kids are doing good things. And now our job is not to ignore the ones that need more help, but not only come up with better programs, but a better way to reach them and their families. We have to stop as a police department, and I committed our police department to not just work with the kids, but to work with the families of those children who need help. Because we can't arrest ourselves out of this situation. We just can't do that. I was on TV, you saw me on TV, and I said, we do not need more laws. There's too many laws. What we need is collaboration. And I think with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions for the chief? Anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, starter.
Quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I want to compliment the PAL program for expanding beyond after-school, tutoring and mentoring and athletics into other venues like Arts Alive.
Right.
I think it's been a great addition, tapping into other interests that young people might have beyond athletic outlets. The other thing that I wanted to ask is if we can get more information about the show program. I know Mr. Gonzalez has brought us some information.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it would be appropriate for a future report to this combined group. Clearly, there are a lot of reservations out in the community based on the previous reputation of the show program, and specifically with regard to what people have allegedly referred to as profiling. I don't know whether that's true. I'm relying on what people have shared with me. So I would very much benefit from a much more thorough report on the show program.
I'd be glad to do that. We're going to be meeting with, the probation department recently hired their brand new probation chief. And Ms. Stewart and I have met. We met with the district attorney. We want to meet more with the schools. We want to do this very slowly. We're going to meet with a lot of the parents. Does profiling exist? Absolutely it exists. It really does. I just think that, to reiterate a little bit of what Mr. House said the other day at a council meeting, it has to be done sensitively. I believe that probably, and I'm not trying to be critical of my predecessor, but we need to go talk to the clients first. And that's what we plan to do, to talk to the kids that are on probation, to talk to the probation officers, to talk to the parents. And I believe it could be successful because at the end of the day, what do we want to do? We want to identify young people that need help right now. We need to identify families that, you know, people say, well, they're in denial. Well, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they need direction. And we cannot point the finger and blame it all on the parents. I think we all play a part. And I think that I would be more than happy to do that. We probably won't be ready to do that for at least a month or two until we go out and talk to the client, the parents, the children, schools, probation, district attorney. And when we do that, then I believe we could begin a real good dialogue about how we're going to present it and not rush to it, but at least rush to sharing why we want to do what we want to do without the profiling stigma of it, because profiling absolutely exists, and as long as I'm sitting in that chair, that's just not going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, and I apologize for leaving. And
Just drive safely.
I'll drive safe, but I got the red light, like I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Nancy, are you going to go ahead?
Okay.
Or?
Let me
Sure.
let me go ahead and introduce Mr. Gonzalez. But before you flip any of those slides, Nancy, let me say this is a very important issue. But it's also a very complex issue. I mean, there's no simple answer to this one. And we have communities that have been dealing with youth violence for years and have not made any progress. There was a point in our community where we did have more progress. We had a number of things put in place, and we had some results to show for it. We've been seeing it go south now for 3 or 4 years. And in fact, we had Ralph Molina come to our school board just 3 years ago, I believe, 2.5, 3 years ago, to talk to us about the problem that we were seeing in the city and the problems that were what we thought spilling over into the schools. And we put this item here on the agenda so that we could clear out the other items and spend our time on this without having the feeling that, oh, we have to go right on to something else. We have a lot of ongoing programs in our schools that promote how students interact with each other, that we treat each other with respect, treat each other with collaborative, a collaborative approach. We have clear behavioral expectations of our students. For example, it's very obvious to all of our students that gang colors are absolutely not allowed. Gang symbols, gang behavior is absolutely not allowed. And in fact, in that respect, our students are gang neutral zones. I mean, we have students from different gangs at the same school in close proximity on a regular basis, and we control those behaviors and set clear standards for the expectations. We think we do that because we have adults there, and all adults on campus are a part of that. So whether you're a teacher or whether you're the custodian on the campus, all of the adults feed into that. And when we let children go their own way after school and they don't have adults present, then we get this kind of behavior, and we find that parents are unaware that this is going on, and that's often the case. In fact, Cam could have spoken to that, and maybe he has in the past. We get a number of parents who say, oh, no, and my child's not involved. And even in this incident where everyone had a cell phone and they were all taking pictures of what was going on, all the kids were, and Cam and Rich Gloss ended up with all sorts of pictures. We're able to identify kids, went into homes, and the parents said, no, my child's not involved in gangs. And yet they'd go into bedrooms and they'd find a lot of evidence of gang symbols, well, et cetera. And we think a big part of this is reconnecting students with adults after school. We cannot leave them alone between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock when the parents come home. Among our ongoing activities, are a lot of programs that work on character development, like character counts or developmental assets, healthy assets. We have conflict resolution programs. In fact, we think these are particularly powerful when students take the responsibility to engage other students in peer resolution and peer mediation. We have student organized clubs, such as Students Organized Against Prejudice. We have a lot of ADL, No Place for Hate activities. All of our secondary schools qualify as No Place for Hate schools. Many anti-bullying efforts. We're always working on that, and it's always perplexing to us when we discover that despite all of our best efforts, we still haven't done enough, and we need to do more. The list is really long. In fact, Barbara Kiani and I took a look at the list. It's some 3 pages long of various activities that we have on an ongoing basis. And of course, our after-school activities are very important to us because these are the times that kids are on their own. When this incident occurred, the secondary principals and I met within hours of the incident. We immediately stopped minimum days because the students in this case had taken the opportunity of a minimum day to rally in town. And while we still have a state required minimum day for the end of the semester, it's interesting, the state requires that, and it's for grading purposes. I mean, it's for very good purposes. So we will have to abide by that, but we halted the other minimum days. We brought in Richard Ramos and started working with Dr. Rios at UCSB, who's an expert on gang prevention. Richard Ramos has now done presentations to over 3,600 students in 11 schools, to over 100 parents, 60 adults who are on our staff, and our teachers do what teachers do best. They take the lessons of the presentation, they carry it on to classroom activities where students then sit and talk and work with these concepts. So we think that is very useful, but again, we don't think it's enough. We're working with several community agencies and nonprofits to build more daily after-school programs. At a school like Santa Barbara High School, where we have some 2,400 students, over 1,000 students are involved in after-school sports. There are also many students involved in extracurricular activities that take place after school, but there are also hundreds of students who go on home or go on to other things and who are on their own. The students who are in our after-school programs at the schools through Parks and Recreation, we think are in very good hands. We need more of that, and we need more of the, we have various groups who have come to us offering help. Areas in the arts. We could be starting arts academies where one group takes responsibility for this part of it on this day of the week. You know, most of those academies and dance studios, for example, are not on a daily basis and need to be provided on a daily basis. So we could be doing more. But most importantly, our work with the parents is, we think, the most critical link here, because we think the days are over when you can just let your kids end their school day and not be accountable until you show up at home. We think they must be connected with after-school activities, and significantly, we have parents asking for more parenting classes, more education classes. So we think we need to spend a lot of our energy in those areas. Now, these are typically areas where we're not provided state funding to provide after-school activities. We need your help in that. We're provided state funding to provide for core classes in the core subject areas and some of the elective subject areas. We're provided additional funding, additional categorical funding for students who are low achieving to provide additional instruction to those students. But add-on activities are simply not funded, not in our general budget. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you our Director of Compliance and Categorical Programs, Michael Gonzalez. And Michael has carried a lead role in this, but no more so than the principal, the administrators, and the instructional staff at every one of our schools.
Thank you very much. I'd like to direct your attention to the screen. You have a copy before you, and there are, for the public, there are copies on that table. Next slide, please. In general, the research indicates that responses to youth violence fall into three categories: suppression, intervention, and prevention. Next slide, please. Suppression. I'm going to echo part of a comment that Captain Sanchez made because I want to make sure that the viewers understand that the police should never be expected to assume the responsibility for gang problems. You know, since the late 1990s, suppression tactics, and that's what the police primarily does. They're involved with suppression. What they primarily, since the late 1990s, suppression tactics have fallen into three categories: state laws that increase sanctions for gang crime and gang involvement, and local ordinances and enforcements of specific criminal codes that restrict gang activities. I remind you that both the Santa Barbara City and I believe Goleta have passed in recent years, for example, anti-loitering laws that make sure that kids understand that during the school day, if you're out and about while you should be at school, you face a citation. Another initiative under suppression is multi-agency and multi-jurisdictional strategies, bringing together several law enforcement agencies in a collective approach. Captain Sanchez might share with you that to this day, in the county, we have not yet established a county-wide collaborative addressing the issues involved with youth violence and gangs, and they are getting very close to establishing such a collaborative. And then finally, number three, collaborative approaches tying together all sectors of the community, i.e. government entities, city council, boards of education, but all those other organizations that are resource-rich, not only in ideas, but also in money in our great community. But there's a very important caveat about law enforcement and suppression that Captain Sanchez alluded to. Several years ago, the LA County requested a study done on what can we do about reducing gang violence in our community. And in January 18, 2007, they issued their final report. And with your permission, I'm going to read this because I think it's very enlightening. After a quarter century of a multi-billion-dollar war on gangs, there are 6 times as many gangs and at least double the number of gang members in the region, referring to Los Angeles. Suppression alone, and untargeted suppression in particular, cannot solve this problem. Law enforcement officials now agree that they cannot arrest their way out of gang violence crisis, and that their crime suppression efforts must be linked to competent prevention, intervention, and community stabilizing investment strategies. Next slide, please. Intervention. Well, Captain Sanchez indicated to you that very graciously the Santa Barbara City Council authorized the police department to add an additional school resource officer to work with our secondary schools. I can't tell you as a former principal how critical their presence is and their fast response to our calls for assistance is. And I wish in this community we could assign more, but we'll take the additional school resource officer that has been assigned to us. You should also know that the County of Santa Barbara, the probation department, has a plan to increase their presence on our high school campuses, continuation, and community high school or community school campuses beginning this July. I will share with you that we are in negotiations with the Santa Barbara Probation Department to share with them our concern that our junior highs should also be included in being serviced. As you know, one of the youngsters involved in the tragedy on State Street was a junior high student. One of the first line of defenses for our schools are what we call our campus supervisors. These are the eyes and ears for our junior highs and our high schools. We have had historically a very difficult time attracting high-quality candidates to these positions because of funding issues. Earlier this year, our district took the initiative of adopting a more attractive salary package in the hopes of attracting more personnel. Those folks are critical to the operations of our schools. And then we need to investigate, again, a funding issue of intervention programs that employ individuals whose specific job is to focus on gang intervention. Dr. Sarvis mentioned earlier these presentations put on by Pastor Richard Ramos, who I hope most of you are acquainted with. In his talks with parents and with school staff, he made it very clear that gangs are involved with a very active recruitment program at our schools. And one strategy for that is that we should be involved in employing people who are actively recruiting for not entering gangs. And so that's another initiative. Next slide, please. The research is pretty clear about prevention, that if we're going to address the issues related to prevention, there are a number of risk factors that we need to address as specific to the school, but it's a community at large issue. Academic failure, low educational aspirations, negative labeling not only by teachers but by staff, trouble at school, few teacher role models, educational frustration. You know, I don't need to share with any of you that the amount, quality, quantity of learning that is currently required in our schools pales in comparison to when we were sitting in those desks. A low commitment to school, low school attachment, high levels of antisocial behavior in school. These are the risk factors that the research indicates we need to address if we're going to impact the issue of youth violence. Next slide, please. How do we do that? Well, we continue to develop and expand behavior management programs in our schools. Dr. Sarvis spoke to some of those issues, making sure that dress codes are enforced in a fair and very compassionate way, but enforced. The full implementation of social competence curriculums to promote the norms against aggressive, violent, and other social behaviors. All of our schools have these kinds of curriculums. I mentioned two. At the secondary level, a very popular one is Too Good for Drugs and Violence. Another one at the secondary level, as well as the junior highs, is Character Counts. We've got to continue to expand our multi-component classroom programs to improve academic achievement. That refers not only to teaching strategies designed to make sure that kids who struggle with learning get it, but all those after-school components, tutoring, mentoring. Well, we'll talk about mentoring in a bit. Expand our after-school recreation opportunities. No doubt that making activities available for young people to keep them focused is a very important component of combating youth violence. Expanding our mentoring program. I want to publicly thank one of our partners. The Fighting Back Group, as you know, is historic in its efforts to put together mentoring programs, and I thank them for their efforts. Create parenting programs that help parents establish respect for three issues: parental authority, loyalty to the family first, and building relationships of trust. The best research in youth violence says that that's the key right there. That if we do not have young people who have allegiance to the family, who respect the authority of the parents, that behavior cannot translate to school staff or law enforcement. And so that's a major thing. I want to share with you, well, I'll finish this presentation. And very clearly, we need to continue to provide and expand teacher and staff training with how do they handle gang-related issues, youth violence-related issues in classrooms and schools. The big challenge, of course, and that's the end of the slides, thank you. The big challenge, of course, is how do you do that in the face of dwindling resources? I refuse to believe that in a city like Santa Barbara, that there are not the economic resources to plug, to take care of, to implement, to expand the kind of programs that we've outlined here before you. I'm going to echo a statement from Richard Ramos. You know, one of the things he said is, look, do not be misled. I do not foresee a time when we will finish, get rid of gang and youth violence. We do not foresee a time when issues of poverty, when issues of racism will end on our planet. However, the kinds of initiatives that we've spelled out here today will go a long way to making this community a safer community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. That was very good. Are there any questions? Good presentation. Yeah, Mr. House.
Well, and as Mr. Gonzalez is sitting down, I don't know if I have a specific question for you, but maybe you want to respond. You know, recently the young people in our community held that youth summit, and they were facilitated by Caring Adults, and it was really quite something there at the courthouse. And they chose for their topic bullying and violence. It was an interesting focus for them, especially given all that the adults in our community and many of us have been concerned about gang violence given the incidents that have taken place. And I have a sense that there's a message in there, and that is that the everyday feeling of safety, to be able to go to school, get there and back safely, be able to put your focus on your education, and do so in a way that that you can be successful and not have that interrupted by the threats and by the kind of things that go on and on, is really important to them. And so I think you're on the same page as Chief Sanchez in the sense that we're addressing this youth violence issue, and gangs is one piece of that big puzzle. But I hope that I want you to respond is I hope we don't get so focused on gangs as such and not train ourselves as caring adults, train the students themselves, be effective in our attention to and remediation of this kind of culture of violence that kind of seems to be going on. And so perhaps you could just address that a little bit. I think we have a huge responsibility. And the last piece, I understand that the whole school approach, that's an actual, as you know, that's sort of a construct. The whole school approach is one that is considered to be particularly effective, where all participants, especially adults, but all participants are engaged in this. But I would suggest perhaps a whole community approach is appropriate, given that we're meeting here jointly today. And you might want to respond to those things.
Well, thank you for that. It's very clear that it's been my experience over the last 34 years that in schools, any kind of negative behavior that's permitted, that is not immediately addressed, young people tend to believe it's okay. We have a license to continue with that kind of behavior. And so school principals will have adopted, continue to adopt, continue to implement a strategy that says, teachers, I know we're all very busy. Do not permit bullying type behavior. When you see it, intercede, prevent it, talk with the young person. During passing times, the junior highs, during passing times, step outside your door, be outside. Young people, if there's an adult present, that kind of behavior tends not to surface. If there's no adult present, it tends to surface. Lunch yards, some of our high schools, we have 2,000 plus kids. And at campuses that enjoy an open campus, I'm not even going to tell you what a logistic difficulty that is. But I guess I simply want to say that you are very correct. It's not just a concern about young people. Captain Sanchez and myself, as well as other members, I'm sure, sitting in this audience today, have been a member of a number of forums since back in March, and parents very clearly have expressed concern for bullying-type behavior. It's not a complicated issue to tackle. What it does require is a very clear, active, proactive approach to it. Everybody recognizes what bullying is. One more important point about bullying, and I did not bring the data today, and at some future date we can have another discussion. The research very clearly indicates that there are pathways that lead to an extreme, unacceptable form of violence, and bullying is one of those low-level things that, if permitted to run, leads inevitably to that kind of behavior that we can't see. So your concern and the concern of the youth is very legitimate. It is something that we are obligated by state law to address, and it's not as difficult as one might make it seem.
I'm going to ask you one specific question and follow up, and then I'll be quiet. Is there a complaint manager at each site, and is there a district-wide complaint manager of some sort that can receive complaints and concerns as they're identified and be able to see patterns develop, or if students leave from one site and move on to another school, you know, they're transferred or they move around, that can see how that kind of movement of a problem? Is that
The
in
answer is
place?
yes. At all school sites, the complaint manager is always the principal. At the district level, before you're looking at the complaint manager.
Well, then, a good guy for the job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
I had a couple of questions. One is the flow of information and the challenge of the flow of information. I mean, the city has a lot of good programs for kids. Nonprofits have a lot of good programs for kids. We've had the challenge in the past of being able to disseminate that in or through the school system. Obviously, you're the most effective way of doing that because there's really no other way to precisely target parents of kids of different age levels. And of course, that puts you guys in an interesting situation because you have to evaluate, well, if you let these people disseminate information through the schools, who else do you let disseminate information through the schools? But I think I feel like there's been some changes in recent months, more of a willingness than maybe to do that, and I'm hoping that eventually we could see some kind of policy where, you know, certain nonprofit programs that have to do with either parenting or youth programs, and especially city projects can be disseminated directly from us through you to the school, to the parents, because that I can't stress more the information gap and the necessity of bringing information on all these programs. Because when I go out there and talk to parents, they don't know these programs exist most of the time, you know, which is really the tragic thing. That's issue number one, and I guess issue number two is going back to the truancy questions, and I mean, I still would love you guys to actually give me an overview, but my central question is, sometimes we're dealing with criminal behavior, sometimes we're dealing with criminal behavior or behavior that's not okay, but has a connection with other issues. And I want to know what kind of screening when you know, you have kids who get into trouble or into the truancy program, what kind of screening for mental health issues do you guys have, and what kind of intervention strategies, mental health intervention strategies do you have to avoid criminalizing kids who have mental health issues, not just behavior issues? And I ask this especially from the standpoint of somebody who is a teacher at Atascadero State, where a lot of these folks end up after tragic life histories of crime, but developmentally, still in grade school.
Sure.
And I really want to know what's going on, how we can help, and whether there's adequate screening for mental health issues.
Well, let me address both those questions very quickly, starting with the first question. First of all, there should not be any impediment to the flow of information between the city and the school district. We have MOUs that very clearly provide for the distribution. And of course, the devil is always in the details kind of thing, but that should not be an issue. However, you do point to an important issue. At a number of community forums, faith-based organizations have asked for increased access to our students, and that is an issue that as a district we need to address. There are a number of very good reasons why schools districts traditionally choose to restrict the number of community agencies that are permitted to distribute literature in our school sites, but it is an issue that we are currently studying, and I hope that by the start of the school year we'll have a recommendation to our board that they can take a look at. The second issue is this. I want to make sure that we're very, very clear. One of the hats that I wear is the expulsion programs for the district. State law does not permit, and our board has never expelled anyone simply on the basis of attendance. As a matter of fact, that information rarely reaches the Board of Education about attendance. The law does not permit expulsions on the basis of attendance. But we do, in 1997, in conjunction with the city and the county, we did set up a targeted truancy program. I'm not going to go in detail at this time. We can do it at a later time. But there is a series. It's a 5-step series. And at each of those 5 steps, beginning with the first step, there are safeguards built in so that kids are not placed into the system when they should not be. I'm going to share with you one statistic about the truancy program. The last step after the last step in the truancy program is when a youngster has missed approximately 84 period absences. 84 period absences. This year, the number of kids who reached that level was 61, right? And so the idea that there's a large number of kids involved in the truancy process is not really based in reality. I will grant you that 61 is 61 too many. I would not want to downplay that number, but I would not want anyone to believe that it's a large number. I want to remind you that we are a school district of 15,000 students, and we're talking about 61 who reached that 5th step. But again, it's not an agendized matter, but we'll come back to you and provide you with a full report on the truancy program.
Thank you.
I don't feel like that's answering the question.
Excuse me, I should have answered your question. At every step of the way, I shared with you that students with special needs, we're obligated at step 1 to see, is that related? And at every step in the targeted truancy program, that is checked to see, is there some kind of learning disability? Is there some kind of family issue that is leading to contributing towards the truancy issue? And that is explored by a number of people. But schools are obligated to do that at the very beginning. In the expulsion process, no youngster is permitted, no school is permitted to recommend a student with expulsion unless that screening process has determined that a learning disability is not a contributing factor to the behavior that led to the recommendation to expel. So there are safeguards built into the system. The law requires that we build those safeguards.
And when does that take place, and what is that screening process?
Again, in the expulsion process, it is what is called the Individualized Educational Program Manifestation Determination Meeting, where the case manager, the teachers who know the student the best, the parents and the young person sit down in a group and decide, we've got to prove two things. Did the behavior that led to the recommendation to expel, at the time that that recommendation is being made, was the student properly serviced? Yes or no, according to his or her needs. Second, was the disability that identified the student for special education services, is a relationship between that specific disability and the behavior that resulted in the expulsion recommendation. If a team decides that there is a connection by law, and as the compliance officer, that school is not permitted to continue with that expulsion recommendation, it is sent back to the school, and the school is directed, put together a plan to assist this young person with that behavior. If, on the other hand, that team determines that there is no connection between the disability and that the student was properly being serviced at the time, then they do recommend the expulsion and the process continues.
So my understanding is that your screening takes place deep into the process before expulsion, as opposed to when a child goes into sort of the watch list, like they've exceeded 84 periods.
Oh, right. We're talking about two different processes.
I understand, and I'm trying to figure that out, because to me, before you start identifying a child as a problem, it would be better to have a screening at a front end instead of the back end, meaning right before you expel them.
And you're correct. And both processes, the targeted truancy program and the expulsion process, require that as the very first step in the process. By law, we're required to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you.
Thank you. We need to move on a little bit here. Ms. Rapp?
Are we finished with the youth violence issue?
No.
Okay.
Nancy Rapp has a presentation from City.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Rapp, the City Parks and Recreation Director. I'm passing out copies of my PowerPoint. I have included a lot of information that I personally am going to cover very, very briefly, but I provide it to you because I know that all of us are involved in addressing community concerns related to youth violence, and it does seem that the most common criticism is that there's not enough going on, and this hopefully can be something that you could pull out that would help you answer questions as they come up in the community. The city, as with the district, has been meeting and talking with a lot of families about their concerns for the increase in youth violence. Certainly, we have seen some changes, particularly at the junior high age in our after-school programs. In recreation, we really talk about two things, and in fact, the community is talking about two things, both prevention and intervention. Our general recreation programs are really more on the prevention end. We're very, very concerned about creating a good foundation for youth as they grow. Recreation programs foster human development, including social, emotional, and physical, promote health and wellness, and facilitate connectedness for the people involved in the programs with their community. I'm going to very quickly just go through some of the programs. You're all very aware of our after-school programs. Down at the bottom, you'll see that we also run drop-in programs at the Lower West Side Community Center, at our Teen Center, and with the Police Activities League, and also general recreation programs at the Carrillo Recreation Center. In summer, we offer a lot of programs for those families who are able to enroll their children in classes and camps. And we have a whole segment of the population for which they either cannot get scholarships or not sufficient scholarships. Oftentimes scholarships are for 1 week or 2 weeks of camp and not the full summer. So for many years, the city has run free programs at Harding, Franklin, and McKinley schools. This year, the City Council has agreed to fund, and we also offer it at the Lower West Side, and that program includes lunch. In addition to that, we have the National Junior Tennis Program and Russ Morrison Golf and swim classes, and then rec swim at 2 pools in the community. We have a number of activities for teens. First and foremost, of course, is our new teen center that's open every day except Sundays. All kinds of classes, dances, excursions, just a number of things. When kids talk about there's nothing to do, it's not true that there's nothing to do. A lot of them aren't aware of everything that they have as options, and sometimes they really don't want to go do something. They just want to be somewhere with their friends, someplace safe, and hang out. And the Teen Center meets a lot of those needs. And a couple things I wanted to highlight. In particular, I wanted to just mention, as a result of all the community discussions, that we have the Teen Center opened at the same time that this unfortunate event happened. Positively, as a result, we've had a number of community organizations step up to the plate and ask to be involved in the Teen Center in expanding programs and activities for teens. This is just a list of some of the partners that we have working very closely with. We don't do it all, just as you don't, so these are just all the different organizations that we have sponsorship agreements with and that we work together to provide programs for youth. I wanted to just talk briefly about scholarships, because this was a question that came up frequently in our community meetings and with our Park and Recreation Commission and with City Council. The city funds, you can see last year we funded almost $90,000 in scholarships. This year we're funding almost $100,000 in scholarships for our after-school programs, summer camps, classes, everything. The promotion for the scholarship program is bilingual, and we still can always do a better job because parents find it difficult to ask for scholarships, and so a lot of times it's outreach that's put forth by staff and the people who are working directly with the families, encouraging them to apply for the scholarships. In our meetings with the community, these were the priorities. Looking at the target audience, in particular, wanting youth employment opportunities and job training programs, a lot of concern about after-school programs, and a recognition that after-school programs are investing in prevention, and many people felt that the junior high program needed to be expanded significantly to reach more junior high youth. A lot of discussion about how to increase recreation services in some of our underserved neighborhoods, and outreach, and in particular, sustainability. At their meeting yesterday, the City Council did direct staff to include almost $175,000 in new funding for youth programs, looking at programs that would be implemented immediately, have a focus on working with our community partners, and sustainability. I am not going to talk about each of these in great detail. You have more information on your slides. I will just say that the Youth Apprentice Program is a program operated by the Parks and Recreation Department. It's been run for years. We reach out and target high school youth in the community and give them job training and get them jobs. So we're expanding the number of youth that will be served by that program from 40 to 80 youth. Also, just very briefly, because it does involve you, we are very hopeful that by the end of 2 weeks, we will have a grant application into the County Workforce Investment Board for $1.1 million. That would be a public-private partnership that would serve over 150 in-school and out-of-school youth in a job training and employment program, working closely with companies in the community and with a focus on trades, because that was one of the discussions that was a priority. I mentioned the junior high program. We're all very aware of the challenges that we've had with that program. City Council did fund $35,000 for this coming year, and the $20,000 for next year. There was a lot of discussion about trying to at least make up the difference that the school district had to cut this year. And this year, with the additional funding, our focus will be to bring in other community partners to really significantly change, expand, and put things in place to have a more successful program for the long term. So staff will be working very closely, as was mentioned earlier, with the district and community partners to do something different and more effective on our junior high campuses. The decision was also made to eliminate the league fees and double the program for the youth sports program that takes place on the 10 elementary schools. Our target is 100 students per school. We're also going to the Fun in the Sun program, operated by United Way and Girls Inc., is leaving Ortega Park. They've been there for a number of years. So we are going to fund a program there that will be operated Monday through Friday. We're very concerned about so many of those kids came from that immediate neighborhood and walked to Ortega Park, so we'll be offering services there. Last summer, we successfully expanded services for this free drop-in summer program at Franklin School. We expand, with the principal's permission, we expanded the program to serve 7th and 8th graders, and we went to a full-day program. We added 60 additional youth just with those 2 changes, and it was very successful. So this funding will allow us to do that at all 3 sites. We're also going to increase staffing at the Lower West Side Center from a half-time to a 3/4 time. And we're going to expand a very successful handball program that operated at Franklin this year. Very popular with our Latino youth and young adults. And that's just a real quick overview of the priorities from the community, the programs that City Council felt were a priority and will be funded for this year. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. We certainly are very appreciative of the community focus on youth and the role that recreation can play in improving lives, and sincerely appreciate the partnership that we have with the school district.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, with our ability to use the schools and the school grounds and that sort of thing. And I know they're community assets, but just the real willingness to have us work with you. It's been very good. Are there questions for Nancy? Did you have one, Laura? Go ahead.
Whether
Anybody else?
teachers could be a resource, elementary school teachers could be a resource for those scholarships, that maybe making our staff aware of that for their students they may be an excellent source.
Actually, they already are, and that's one of the reasons, just to give you, 71% already of the youth that are involved in the after-school sports program are on scholarship. And that comes from our relationships with the schools. And in particular with the Campership Alliance that provides summer camperships to all the schools. It is our relationships with the school and the family school advocates. And it is because of that we have been so successful in getting kids scholarships. It's one of the most important reasons.
Okay. Anybody else? No, it's very good. Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
Bob, did you have something on this?
Not for Ms. Rabb,
Okay.
but in general.
Okay.
Is now an appropriate.
Brian, are you finished? Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My focus is on the school district particularly.
Sure.
and I've been reading the things that have been coming out, and I can't help but get the impression that there's sort of there's a long list of citations of things that have been done and are being done, and more concretely after the tragedy on March 14th, some very specific things like inviting Pastor Ramos in for those discussions. But I can't help but get the feeling that in looking at all the variety of things, whether it has to do with the NCJJ program or other programs that are cited as addressing this problem, that there's a loss of focus, or there is a lack of focus. That, for example, on that list, my recollection is the English Language Learner Program is shown as something contributing to the issue of youth violence. I can make that connection, but I can make other connections a lot more directly. And I was particularly struck when I looked on the floor of my office and found a box of things that I had been not wanting to read. And that was a stack of the public safety reports, one for each of the schools in our district. And literally, my colleagues will know what I'm talking about. It's a stack about this thick. And you glance at them, but I thought, I really, before I throw these things out, I need to read one of them. I read one of them, and it contained information that just puts this whole discussion of youth violence for me, into a different context. One component of that report is something called the Healthy Kids Survey. And if I'm leaning heavily on staff who've taught me most everything I know about this, but that was conducted by WestEd, both in 2004 and in 2006. And it involves a survey of the students in the district. And they tried to get them all, but they got 1,278 seventh graders, they got 1,088 ninth graders, they got 1,105 11th graders, sorry, 9th and 11th, yeah. And then I look at this and I find in here a statement that says, or a table, that says guns on campus. How many, and it lists the number of students who say, out of that group of people, the number of students who say that they carried a gun on campus at least 2 or more times in the last 12 months. Well, I see guns on campus from an expulsion hearing perspective, and we don't get them very often. And it makes you feel good. You can go home and sleep at night. When I read this, I couldn't sleep at night. Because while the percentage was small, for example, 7th graders, 3%. 3% of 1,200 kids comes out to a substantial number of kids. And that's only the 7th graders. Then you think, well, they didn't ask the 8th graders. Shall we assume that only the 7th graders bring guns on campus and not the 8th graders? And if you assume that maybe they're about the same, that doubles the number. And then you look at 4 schools, 4 junior high schools, and say, however small this is as a percentage, I sure am not comfortable about the idea that kids are carrying guns on campus. Maybe they're all just boasting. And I don't know how to evaluate that. And based on what I've learned about the survey, there's no data that lets you evaluate that. Then you look at other weapons on campus, much larger numbers. They list clubs and knives as examples, much larger numbers. Again, students saying that they brought them on campus at least 2 times in the last 12 months. I don't know what these data mean, but to me, they warrant a closer investigation, and particularly they frame the problem that the school district faces a little differently. For example, if these are to be given credence, if there's some reality associated with those statements by students in answering these questionnaires, I would rather see the emphasis first priority. And please bear with me, I think multivariate terms, but it's hard to talk in multivariate terms, okay? This is a systemic problem, many levels, many factors. But in terms of priorities, I look for things that are immediately dangerous And I say those are our top priority. And then I wouldn't put my emphasis on, as an immediate response, on things that address change within the family, within the kind of the microcultures of families. Although it doesn't say that's not important. It has to do with the immediacy in terms of impact on campus safety, and one being much longer term and one being much shorter term. And so when I look at this and then I listen to I look at these data, and the name of the report is Teaching Technical Report Fall 2006 Santa Barbara High School, the one I have. The data are for the district-wide. This says Core Module A, and it's a public document. I'm sure that we can have this available to everybody who's interested if they check with the school district. My sense is that what we have not done in this area, and for me again, the we is we in the school district. We have not really thought about this in broad systemic terms. We have not. These data have been in the district for 2004 and 2006. I have a hunch we're maybe not connecting the dots. Well, that's a familiar charge ever since a particular war. That we somehow get information in the system and the system doesn't know how to put them together. That leads me to wonder whether or not we have a focal point, a coordinating point, a locus in the organization that does that connects dots, that pulls together information, that embodies expertise, or if it doesn't have it, goes and gets it. And my sense is that we have a long way to go at this level, conceptualizing, pulling together information resources, setting priorities, rather than simply wading in and doing. We take something because it may be off the shelf. There's a firm that offers the service, and it's a good service. We have to address it sooner or later. We take it, but at the meantime, maybe they're not telling the truth, but we have a bunch of kids in our schools who are telling us something quite different about, and this isn't just about guns and knives, it's about marijuana, it's about alcohol, it's about intimidation, threats, bullying, and how it is perceived by students. The numbers I've given you are among the smallest response rates in the whole survey. With my comments.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. House.
I know we're going to need to be going here real soon. I appreciate what Dr. Noel was just saying. The thing that we're doing here today, that joint meeting deal, the idea of collaborating and getting together a few times each year to, put our heads together on some of this stuff, seems to me to be a really precious thing, and it's a little piece of what you're talking about there, I think, along with that complaint manager question I had earlier. Who can see the patterns, who can begin to see, and then inform the discretionary bodies so we can make informed decisions about our budgets and where we put our attention and that kind of thing. I'm interested right now in what can come out of our continuing to meet together. So over the past, I'm the new guy on the block kind of from the city council side, so I've heard tell that this has been going along well enough for a while, and we're doing some nice things together. But we've got some big challenges. And this is one of them, the youth violence deal, funding for the school district. It's been difficult for us in the city as well. Land development issues, the armory, the combination of services, the joint powers thing. There's just a lot of different areas that we can stand, that if we collaborate, if we continue to work together and put our heads together on, our staffs together on, we can, I think, bear some pretty great fruit. However, if when we meet, and I'm not saying today is like that, but if we meet and we celebrate each of our individual accomplishments, there's nothing new that comes out of our having gotten together. We might as well just read each other's reports, and that would be nice to know what we're all doing. So I'm interested in knowing where we're going with this relationship. And saying it in kind of a positive way. And not, we can't answer it right now, but I want to raise this issue of what could we be accomplishing in our future, not just meetings, but the time in between, and how can we keep it positive? How can we keep it a constructive engagement, so that if one of us is in one of our groups is weak in an area, another one can help pick it up, or the other way, anyway, it's kind of a generalized thing, but it's important for me because I think the community really expects something from us, and we have decided to join together and to do something that isn't written in our particular charters, but is important. So I put that on the table for us. This is sort of in the topic of what we could be discussing in the future, and maybe there's others who want to chime in, but I'd like us to be thinking like that between now at least and the next meeting.
Okay, Mr. Williams?
I wanted to speak to just briefly in agreement with Dr. Noel that those kind of surveys are disturbing. I would say less the number that say they bring guns. I mean, personally, I would have said yes back in junior high. I mean, there's a certain amount of, when you do a good analysis, even though I didn't, I would just done that to mess with you. But
They bring swords to council meetings.
But
Yeah, there you go. You brought a sword here today.
Well, yeah, that's for a picture.
Oh.
I think sometimes you need to do a little bit of when you're doing surveys, you need to do a certain amount of verification. Though I do find that when you're talking about drugs, alcohol, and lesser weapons like the clubs and knives, that the kids generally are very honest in their surveys about that, and those are scary numbers, and we need to look at that. And I think we're wrestling with that, but I agree with Mr. House that it would be we're evolving in these meetings. I mean, these meetings really started as how Mr. House described, was sort of like we tell each other what we're up to. Now we're starting to get into this grayer area where hopefully our decisions are affected by each other. I mean, I know that we wouldn't have allocated $35,000 towards the junior high after-school program if it had not been cut, in your case, by $20,000. I don't want to admit that almost, because I don't want to encourage you to cut it anymore, because we can't necessarily keep on going back to that well. We just ended up being in a pretty good space this year, and we're in a less good space next year, which is why we only have $20,000 allocated for it. But our decision making is definitely affected by yours, and I think that also works vice versa. And I think it would be useful for us to meet more often, more substantively, and longer when we do meet in kind of some deliberative fashions, especially where our program missions, like with the youth, directly bleeds over from one agency to another.
Okay, Ms. Schneider, and then Ms. Renard, do you have something else? Okay.
Thank you. I would agree that perhaps our semi-annual meeting should be longer. I don't know if the talking heads in the room need to meet more often. I frankly think the direction that we can give to our respective staffs to then come back and show results is more important than us just meeting, just for the sake of meeting. So, but I mean, I understand the intent of what Das is trying to say, and I appreciate that, but I don't know. I was recently on a grant committee process for the Santa Barbara Foundation, just sort of a extracurricular activity on my part, which was great for the human services process. And I'm sure, as you all know, as you apply for grants, how important it is when you're applying for funds that it be outcomes-based, that it's not just give me money because we're doing something good, is, well, what am I going to get in terms of, if I'm going to give you X amount of dollars, or if you're asking for twice as much as we can offer, what is it that we can, what's the outcomes base of the funding that we're going to give you for those programs? And what we heard just now was an amazing list of activities that I think we know work in one way or another. I think what's missing is what I'm hearing what Dr. Noel saying is maybe, I don't know if it's a lack of or just an unawareness of the focus of where those activities bring us at the end of the day, or at the end of the month, or at the end of the year. And perhaps what I'm hoping in terms of this next year, I'll just go back, Das, myself, and Roger on the Finance Committee, really struggled with the second year of our 2-year financial plan on youth issues, but also a whole range of other citywide concerns. And, you know, you could have one bad month in transient occupancy tax in the hotel, and we're going to have to, you know, then it just messes up the whole budget. So it's not like we can just put more money and more money and more money into programs. We have to know what we're getting for those funds, and we have to use our money wisely in a way that reaches out into the community and hopefully makes a broader base support. And part of our rationale with year 1 and year 2 levels of funding was to use this year as a way to enhance the relationship we have here. And I think I'm getting to what Grant's talking about is, well, what are we doing now with this? What happens now? And to say, look, you know, the school district has financial issues. The city was good this year because of good planning and a good economic situation, but that can change very easily from one year to the next. So we can't just rely on government to provide the funds for the services. So 2 things need to happen. One is a re-engaged, proactive way of reaching out to the community, to whether it's the philanthropic community or to businesses or to whomever, to try to partner with different activities, but also to show what are we getting for all this money? What are the outcomes? How many kids are doing certain things? What's the preventative measure of you know, the reduction in crime in some areas and the promotion of other activities in others? And really try to quantify that as much as possible, because not only will that bring us additional partnerships in the long run, because they'll, you know, past behavior is indicative of future behavior, but I also think it will help us shape which programs are working well and which programs maybe need to be augmented or changed or amended somehow. So I'm really hoping from this conversation and all the work we've all done in the last several months that sort of a renewed and maybe different way of looking at how we can work together in providing the services we know we need to provide, but in a way that's not just trying to shell out the taxpayer dollars one way or another and only rely on that one source of funding. So I look forward to that. And so when we come back to a grant, going back to the foundations and what they ask for, if you come back a second time for funding, it says, okay, so what did you do with the first round? And how are we going to expand and build on that? And we need to know that information in a way that we can present out to the public and understand ourselves better. So.
Good point. Ms. Renard. Good point.
I just, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr.
I just saw a couple things I had circled here, didn't say, and one of them was apropos of what we're saying. We have a committee on joint use.
Mm-hmm.
What about a committee on, or a committee on connecting dots?
I used to like that.
Do we have an
I was good at
interagency, a continuing body, interagency body dealing with youth violence? And if not, maybe that's something we ought to be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because I sense you talk to Chief Sanchez, you get this wealth of information. You talk to Mr. Gonzalez, you get a wealth of information. Ms. Rapp gave us an incredible report of things that are going on. But who's putting it all together on an operational basis? Who is saying we need guidance to the policy boards? We need guidance on priorities here. We need you to give us some way to structure our activity, to structure the information, so that it leads to really specific, measurable results, right? Measurable results, which in all of our businesses, I guess, are pretty important. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Renard.
I'd like to say, first of all, that it disturbs me a little that this subject has been titled, referred to as youth violence. Form follows function, function follows form, and to simply construe this as a problem of youth violence, I think all of you can realize that the youth violence is just the tip of the iceberg, the symptom of a larger problem, and I think probably, just off the top of my head, a better term would be youth alienation. And I think that's really what should be addressed here, instead of, quote, youth violence. That does a disservice to the youth and to yourselves, really. The other thing that I'd like to say is that it's really sad to me that you're receiving important public comment after 2 hours of a meeting on a Friday afternoon. This is the most important issue regarding youth that you have facing you, and Mr. Sarvis has made it so this is the last item on the agenda, despite Doss Williams' request and the truancy program comments have been lost in the sea of other issues having to do with this problem. I think this was done purposefully. I know it was. I'm used to the school board and the school district and administration. I hope that Marty Bloom will give me a few extra minutes since there's been no other public comment and this is a big topic. I'd like to say, first of all, that Mr. Sarvis is wrong that there are no funds available for basically social programs. There are the federal safe school programs funding that are available for just such programs, and the schools don't use it for constructive programs. They probably use it for more probation officers, though. And speaking of the more probation officers, I happened to go to the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Committee meeting in Solvang last week at the county committee. And the reason there's more probation officers in the schools is because Bill Cerrone went to that council and claimed emphatically, I read it's in their minutes, it's in print, that truancy is the cause of gang violence. So now we're having more probation officers in our schools to make it so they don't even have to refer kids to the truancy program to get them in probation now. They can just do it right from the school sites. Yeah, great going, Mr. Cerrone. The other thing is Mr. Gonzalez's comments on how students are assessed for special needs when they start first showing signs of problems is just simply not true. Sometimes they're assessed, and I work with these kids, and Joan Esposito of the Dyslexia Resource Center, we work with these kids, so what I'm telling you comes from real experience and educated experience, so I feel that my input is valuable. The assessments, when they finally are done, sometimes, very rarely, after parents beg and beg the schools for help because they know their kids have problems with learning or problems socially. And when they finally do get the assessments, I've seen a lot of these assessments, and they are bogus, if not fraudulent. The disabilities sometimes actually show up on the data of these psychological tests because it's done by computer and scored by computer, and they ignore, the parents can't understand these computerized printouts. It's a bunch of statistical mumbo jumbo. And even sometimes the data on there shows the disabilities, but at the in the written report it will say, student, it will ignore that data. I imagine some of the data is fraudulent too. I wouldn't put it past them at this point. It's that bad. And Mr. Gonzalez's PowerPoint on school initiatives in response to the youth violence, the so-called youth violence problem, which in my opinion is a school problem. I think this should be called a school problem, not a youth violence problem. The schools are really good at telling kids that they have to be responsible. That's why they're getting in trouble. That's why they're being expelled. That's why they're being sent to the truancy program. Oh, you have to be responsible. But when they violate the law, and we go and point it out at public school board meetings or file complaints, they're never held responsible, and the kids see this. I see the kids see this. I hear the kids talking about how the school, when I try to enforce the laws with the school, and the school just blows me off, I see the kids watching all this happen. No wonder the kids out there are angry. And we get nowhere talking with the school board, so I really hope the city council can do something. I feel the city council should take steps to do something about this. Anyway, Mr. Gonzalez's PowerPoint, if you notice that it looks maybe good if you look at it, but then when it comes to the prevention, there is not one plan in there or indication that they're ever going to make an effort to determine what might be actually causing the problems in a child's life. Nothing about that in all these 8 little dots here of what they're going to do for prevention. I notice things like that because they're very good at it. I've been watching this happen for years. This is your schools. This is the city's kids all go to the Santa Barbara School District schools. You have oversight over that. You have jurisdiction, you have legal jurisdiction over these children's welfare, City Council. Now we get to the truancy program and the SARB. Mr. Gonzalez's point that only 51 students reached stage 5 of the truancy program. Well, I've dealt with those kids that have been in the truancy program, and by then, most of them are in juvenile hall, and they're not on in the truancy program records anymore. Or else they're on formal probation in El Puente, where they have to go to school, or they get thrown right in juvenile hall that day. So yeah, they can make it look good, and they do. But even the truancy program statistics don't look good. That's why they stopped their funding for the few people who were doing any good, including Myrna Ramos, who had to leave her job because of the stress that the school retaliation was putting on her, because she was actually trying to help these students as a truancy prevention coordinator. The SARB is the Student Attendance Review Board. It's the statutorily created committee that's supposed to, by statute, the reason for this committee is to try to prevent students who are having attendance problems enter the juvenile justice system. And instead, and it's supervised, it's under the jurisdiction of Bill Cerrone, County Superintendent of Schools, who probably the mastermind behind most of what's going on in this regard. The SARB is mandated to prevent these students from going into the juvenile justice system, and instead it's simply a funnel into probation. It's supposed to have representatives from the community and community-based organizations. It was violating the Brown Act for probably 8 years before I filed a complaint. It was meeting completely in secret, and even now nobody knows about it. I go every once in a while. I've forced them now to have an agenda and to have a time for public comment and to show what the decisions of their closed meetings are when they discuss student cases. They never look to see if the student has a disability. The only counseling they recommend is from the drug and alcohol counseling they have. There may be one member of the committee that's not a probation officer or a police officer, and your city participates in this. You send a police officer to the SARB board, and Officer John Williams is the one I'm familiar with, and he fully participates in what's going on here where these kids are funneled into probation. I don't know if Cam Sanchez, who I commend for his efforts, he seems to be able to see the light that these kids need help and actual time spent looking into what their problems are. But this SARB board doesn't. And they're supposed to have a parent representative on the SARB board. Well, their parent representative was an employee of the truancy program who happened to have a kid. When I went to complain, I complained about it with the county school board who is responsible for the SARB. I received no comments, and they voted again to put this person on the SARB. It's ridiculous. So, you guys really need to start sitting up and taking notice of what's going on with your schools. The funding has been cut for California schools. And despite the appearances they're trying to put up, and with their PR person that we're spending our taxpayer money have hired, they're doing a pretty good job of making it. And Mr. Sarvis is very glib and makes it sound nice, but, the funding for the schools has dropped, and this is what you get. And you have it.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you for the extra time.
Sure. Okay, we're down to the last item, which is for next time, and I have 2 things already listed. One comes after the other one, naturally, which is the truancy program and the show program, which goes with it. And then I also listed Fighting Back, because they have a lot of statistics on youth and drinking and youth and marijuana use and all that sort of thing. And I think it would be good to have a little presentation from them. Yes, Mr. Williams, and then.
I want to echo that I really want to have a presentation on how this truancy system works, because I feel like we are stakeholders in that system. And in particular, I want to be real specific so that you get it into the minutes. And I'd like to know how you evaluate success versus a lack of success in the program. To me, there is some issues that I guess are are red flags that I wonder about. I mean, 84 class periods, I can tell you that, you know, I would have qualified in the first quarter, or at least by the second, and every kid I knew that I hung out with, and we were bad kids, but we weren't like threats to other people bad kids, you know, to the, I guess, I also would love detail on what, on the screening question, though I think you answered that question. Thank you for doing that. And especially on the front end, I'm more concerned about, I guess I'm concerned about where we as a society and how we categorize kids in general. I mean, I believe in suppression when it's appropriate. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we just voted to fund the neighborhood bike patrol. But I also feel like there's a lot of kids out there that have shaved heads, white T-shirts, and are brown, who are not gang members.
You know, Dawes, this isn't on the agenda, and we're supposed to be talking about what's going to go on the agenda.
Sure.
And if you want to talk to people about that, we can afterwards, but there are an awful lot of us that have things we have to go to right now.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, quickly.
Harder?
Yeah, Dr. Noel referred to some fairly disturbing statistics in the Healthy Kids Survey. And I think that should be the source of a lot of what our future activity focuses on, programs, et cetera, that come out of that, and then evaluation of how effectively those programs are working. But Davis Hayden, who's our Director of Research and Technology, has been looking very closely at the Healthy Kids Survey and takes grave issue with the kinds of numbers that we're getting from West Ed. So I'm wondering if within our district we shouldn't be taking a look at the Healthy Kids Survey and then bringing forward a report from Dr. Hayden at our next gathering.
That'd be good. I'd be interested. Anything else for the next agenda? We're almost full. Yeah, Ms. Parker. Okay.
Sort of in preparation for the next agenda, if you're going to have truancy on there, the school board did, just 2 months ago or so, had quite an extensive report on the truancy program given to them, and I'm wondering if ahead of time or soon, the city council members could get a copy of that report,
That
so
would be
that
good.
would be prep them for that.
That would be good. As a teacher, I'm pretty aware of all that stuff too, but I think it'd be really good for the rest of us. And I'd like to see it too. Mr. House?
Whether it's on the next agenda or even a subsequent one.
Okay.
I mentioned land development. There may be opportunities for us to be cooperating on some of these issues that are coming in
Well,
the
we have
near.
that subcommittee, so we better report back.
Be good to
Yeah.
good to hear back on that. The
I
second,
think we're meeting on Monday.
which we got a report today of a variety of programs that are vocationally oriented, and I know we meet with the Santa Barbara City College board once in a while, but it just seems like if there's more that we can do in that area cooperatively, it would be something I'd like to know about. And then just that very last thing, where pretty much everything I'm looking at is what we can do together that we couldn't do separately.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's been a good meeting.